Hi, welcome to Actual Spinster. My name is Anna Marie and today I'm going to do a spring TBR video. Should we do this kind of chronologically? Okay, so I have 8... Immediately there's a caveat. I have 8 books to show you, and then I have another book that's that I've already started reading but quite a long time ago that I'd like to finish. Potentially, but I will say that I'm not kind of pinning myself down to reading all of these. I like to kind of pick a TBR where hopefully I'll read like from the selection. I tend to not be able to like read all of the books that I put on my seasonal TBRs, but I do like to, but I still feel like I'm giving them attention, and it's really nice to pick out and like plan a little selection of like books to read in a season and kind of create a vibe based off of that. Yeah, we'll see how much of these I read, but I think that they all will be interesting and good, hopefully. So yeah, I'm gonna go through these chronologically. I think this one is before this one, but I'm not really paying that much attention to it, but you know. So the first book I have put on my TBR, which I realized I included another play in a video I made about like the classics I want to read in 2026, but I should have put this play on there instead of the play that I did put on there. So I'm kind of going to count like if I read that as reading the book on the classics TBR I made as a success. I put The Night of the Burning Pestle on, but I want to read this first and more than this, and it's also partially because I want to read a book that references this, but I haven't even said what this is. Sorry, this is The Witch of Edmonton, which is a play by Thomas Dekker, John Ford and William Rowley, and it's about a witch of Edmonton, and there's a person who plays there's a character that is a dog, like a demonic dog, and I'm just like, yeah, really interested. I guess I read 2 pages so far, so we're really getting there. But yeah, I'm just like, I'm interested in the representation of women, of witches, and also this is like an older woman, and then I also am really intrigued about this idea of like an actor animating like a dog character, and I think there's lots of interesting stage directions about that too. So anyway, really intrigued to read this, and then to read more of around it as well. It's a play that was published I think in the early 1600s, like 1610 or something. I'm not gonna look that up, but I might correct myself if I want to. But in the kind of era of like Shakespearean drama too, like that kind of late 1590s, early 1600s period, I think. So I feel like my ribbon is gonna fall off, but that's okay. The next book that's from the same like early modern era is The Blazing World and Other Writings by Margaret Cavendish. I think this was also on my classics TBR. Quite a few of these books have been on recent TBRs, but that's because I'm like trying to kind of take the larger lists and then make a sort of smaller one for this season. So, but this should be really intriguing because Margaret Cavendish and The Blazing World in particular is kind of seen as one of the first science fiction novels, or like pieces of fiction. Whether it's actually long enough to be a novel is another question. And Margaret Cavendish herself is like a really interesting and bizarre figure. And yeah, it just was like, it's just time to read it, you know. Last year I was reading a bit more early modern stuff, and this has been on my bookshelf for a long time. And so I was like, it's finally time. And I bought it for £1 for the late Renaissance course, which I don't think I did, or maybe I did. I think I did the early Renaissance course, but it was £1 and I wanted to read it because it's by a woman from the late Renaissance, I mean. And that was like 8 years ago. Yeah, but I also really like the painting they've chosen for the cover. I'm not saying anything good about it, but it's because like I don't, you know, I know that it's like an interesting tale about like going to other worlds, and I think the main character is Margaret Cavendish. And it's like philosophical, and there's maybe like bears too or something, but yeah, I haven't read it yet, so you know. Okay, the next one is a book that I have actually also started reading, I guess, but I'm not counting it in the same way that the one that I want to talk about as like a book to finish, because this book has been on my 2026 short story reading challenge, and so far I've read I think maybe 3 from here. Oh, okay, no, just 2. So this is Keynotes and Discourse by George Edgerton. It was originally published in the 1890s, and it's, a collection of short stories about women in particular, and I think also labour, and it was the 2 I read from this were really interesting and also very beautifully written, and I just think it would be really great context to read, and also I'm just very interested in reading it. So this is one of, I actually have chosen another which is maybe a bit ambitious, but this one's definitely the priority short story collection I would like to finish during springtime. And I think like I will probably still use my dice kind of rolling game. I'll leave a link to the video where I talk about that to help me get more into this. again, because I have read from other collections now, and you know, I don't have like my momentum built up with this, which I think I might need to get back in, because as I've said many times before, short story reading is difficult for me. I'm gonna redo my ribbon, sorry. Okay, so the next book is a book from 1918, I think, definitely 1910s, which is called Whatnot by Rose Macaulay. I think it would be quite a short book, but yeah, this is a book I got last year when I was getting really into and interested in Rose Macaulay and the kinds of writing she was doing. This is actually, I think, the first book of hers that I became interested in. I just found it really hard to find like a copy of that wasn't really expensive. It's a speculative novel. I think it's a little bit like Potterism, which is the other book that I've read by her, which is to say a kind of story that is thinking about newspapers and the narratives they create around social hierarchy, social contagion. This definitely, I think, is about eugenics. I'm sure I've said this before. Is this supposed to have actively inspired Aldous Huxley's Brave New World? I think it is. Either way, it's before that book, and that book's obviously much more famous than this book, but maybe this book should be just as, if not more, famous. Yes, really want to get to that. Okay, then the other short story collection on this TBR is A Provincial Newspaper and Other Stories by Miriam Karpilov, and translated, from the Yiddish by Jessica Karzane. This one I have read, I've definitely read at least one. I think it was called A Clever Mother, and I think I also read another one, or maybe I just started the longer story. The majority of these short stories are from the 1930s and were published in newspapers, specifically Vorwärts, which was a Yiddish language newspaper. I mean, it still is, although it also publishes English language stuff, and I don't think they have any physical stuff anymore. I think it's all online, but I could be wrong. Vorwärts is like a really famous Yiddish newspaper in terms of like Yiddish literary culture, but also just like the social life of Jews especially in New York City. I read like this really lovely graphic kind of non-fiction but imaginative story called A Bintel Brief, which was about it was inspired a lot by this column in Vorwärts, which was an advice column where people would write in for advice and then get responses back. That was really lovely. And so yeah, anyway, I say that in the sense of trying to contextualize some of the work of this, although I think those advice pages and stuff and the book that I read with that stuff in, well, that was a bad sentence, but I think that was more focused on like earlier stuff as opposed to 1930s. So but yeah, then there's also like a longer story, which I think is kind of novella length, called A Provincial Newspaper, which is what I have actually started. I read the first like very short section, which was actually about a person being asked to write for a provincial newspaper, as you might be able to tell. So yeah, really intrigued to read this on multiple levels, like Yiddish women, and then also from a kind of thinking about newspapers, fiction in newspapers perspective, because that's what I do for my like PhD research a lot, especially at the moment. But you know, also this is not for that, it's a fun thing. It's just obviously I have a sort of interest in the stuff in general, as well as more particularly in specific for my actual research work. But yeah, also I do feel like the cover is quite spring, like green, kind of bluey, and then you do see hints of like some of the floral like pinks and stuff. Do you know what I mean? I think I know what I mean. Then I have this, which is a non-fiction book that was in my non-fiction books that I want to read this year, TBR, and that's Fighting Women, Interviews with Veterans of the Spanish Civil War. This technically wasn't published, but I put it in the 1930s era for the chronology, I don't know. Yeah, I've showed this on my channel a lot, partially because my friend Mari, who sometimes appears on my channel, she wanted to read it and then finally did read it, and so I had like lent it to her, and now it's back with me. And yeah, I think it's, you know, it is what it says on the tin. Translated into English for the first time, this edition is by Isabella LaRusso. Sorry, I didn't say that. And I'm just really, excited to read the perspective and experiences of these like incredible and interesting, powerful anti-fascist, leftist, communist, anarchist women. Okay, we're in slightly more modern territory with, I think this was from the 1980s, so this is Love Medicine by Louise Ardrich. I picked this up, I guess 2 years ago now, maybe slightly more than that, and I just haven't got around to it, partially I guess because I'm a little intimidated to start. I haven't read anything by Louise Ardrich before, and you know, I think I'm gonna like her. It's just she has quite a large body of work, and like, you know, and I know this is kind of, I'm not sure if it's the actual beginning of the series, but I believe it's the first book that she published in the series, even if the series itself is like not quite, it's not like the chronology of the series is accurate to the publication chronology. But I think I'll be okay starting with this one. If you think I'm wrong, let me know and I will not do that then. But I'm pretty sure I looked it up before I picked this up and it was fine. It's, I think, a story about two families, the Cashpaws and the Lamartines, and is a kind of multi-generational exploration of those two intertwining slash the conflict between those two families and the people in them. Yeah. Okay, so then we have modern published, most recent published books. So this is Blackwater Sister by Zen Cho, and this book is kind of on this TBR because it's like, I think I need to be pushed to try it properly or decide that it's not a book that I'm that interested in reading anymore. I did try to listen to the audiobook of it like a few, I don't know how long, like actually many years ago I think at this point, or like can't have been that many because it didn't come out super, but you know, and I really didn't like the audiobook narrator, and I felt like if I listened to it that would really impact my experience of the narrative voice and the story in a really negative way, and I didn't want to do that to this book. I felt like that would be mean. So I decided to try and read it physically, and then I haven't really actually given it the time to do that. But I think I might really enjoy it. But yeah, just really intrigued to get to it. I think so. It's about, I'm pretty sure it's about a lesbian. Yes, this person called Jessamine Teo starts hearing a voice in her head, but really it's maybe the voice of her estranged grandmother. Yeah, there we go. So I love stuff about ghosts and things like that, so that part could really be great. But Jessamine has to move back to Malaysia with her parents, and she's closeted, broke and jobless. The voice in her head draws her into a world of gods. Sorry if that was a really bad summary. I didn't want to just read out the blurb, because you can look up the blurb if you're that interested. And also I think, you know, more people were reading this when it came out. I haven't heard that much about it recently. I have read something else. Actually, have I read two things by Zen Cho? I'm pretty sure I have, because it is Zen Cho who wrote, oh, I'm forgetting all of the names of things. I will put the pictures of the books I'm thinking about if they are by Zen Cho, which I'm pretty sure they are, that I've read, you know. But yeah, so there's this, which is kind of like, if I don't want to read it, like if I start reading it and I don't want to read it, then I'm gonna probably DNF it. I think I'm using the spring TBR to try and like galvanize myself to like get into it or pass it on to someone else who would enjoy it. This copy is already secondhand, so it's sort of like nice to do that as well. Okay, and then the final book, I feel like I didn't have that much to say about this stuff, but I seem to have talked for a while. But the final book is then this book, which is Sky Papers by Jamika Ajalon, and I started it 2 years ago now, let's say, I think. I got to page 126 and then I just like lost my momentum, and I wasn't enjoying it as much as I expected myself to. I think I did have way too high expectations, which really impacted my reading experience. And then yeah, you know, sometimes you just lose your momentum with a book, and like it's hard to get back into the flow of reading it, even if it's not that the book was like so bad that I was going to DNF it, you know. It's just like I stepped out of the world, I became engaged in other things, and then I had other things to read, and then gradually you just move away and away from it, and then it's like it's been months, and I don't know how long it's been since I did last read this, but it probably has been a while. But I'm about halfway through the book, and it's not a super long book. It's about 280 pages. Yeah, and you know, it was intriguing. It's kind of about like art and surveillance and being like a black artist and the kind of transnational travel and community between, in particular, I think New York and London. There's also squatting. I think it's set in the 1990s. So yeah, it's partially just that people were like, this is like Loat by Shola von Reinhold, which is a book that I adored. It's one of my favorite books of all time. And so going into this book being like, it's gonna be like one of my favorite books of all time, is like, this poor book didn't really have its own chance, you know, to be itself, as opposed to like Loat. Which is maybe something I should have been a bit more careful about before I went into reading it, but that's okay. As I'm talking about it, I am getting more and more intrigued as to like finding out how this ends and if I do like it, and you know, what I think ultimately. So I will try to finish this in springtime. So those are all the books that are on this little TBR. Definitely let me know if you've read any of them or would recommend them. I like that we go through kind of a range of genres. We've got, you know, some early speculative fiction. We've also just got like a play, and the early speculative fiction is very early, I guess. We've got some short stories, we've got one non-fiction. So yeah, thank you for spending your time with me. And I think that's everything I had to say. Let me know if you have any particular spring reading plans. But yeah, I will talk to you when I next talk to you. Bye!